with us. Hi, Max. How are you?
Hey Jimmy, how you doing?
So I saw the Tucker Carlson segment he did on Monday, and
Yeah,
I want to just go over it with you. You were there, right? You were there on January 6th, Max?
I was uh, I was the Jewish QAnon alternative shaman.
So there's a lot of
So let me just point out a little detail here. This video is the equivalent of, imagine if Jimmy Dore did a video. So Rachel Maddow does some big expose on MAGA or something, right? And then Jimmy Dore is like, hey, so Rachel Maddow did a video about MAGA. Let's take a look. Now, we know what he would actually do. If she did a video like that, he would do a video attacking it, of course, because he's an anti-liberal commentator or entertainer, right? That's what he does. But Tucker Carlson does it. I mean, this is a guy on, one of the biggest mainstream media networks. I mean, he's an ultra elite establishment guy, right? Tucker, Mr. Bowtie Tucker, right? And here, Jimmy Dore has no problem going out and pushing out this mainstream media narrative, right? From an elite multimillionaire, Tucker Carlson. Just to clarify what we're looking at here. Imagine if Tucker were Rachel Maddow. How ridiculous would it seem? Well, it should seem as ridiculous as it would if it was her, just as well as it did Tucker. Because I wouldn't be surprised if the two of them are friends behind the scenes.
video that has been released to Tucker Carlson. He is the number one news show in America, so why wouldn't you? So McCarthy, the speaker, the Republican speaker.
He's the number one news show in America, so why wouldn't you? Rachel Maddow, one of the highest rated people in liberal media. So she's the perfect person to release a bunch of MAGA footage because we really want to hear what Rachel Maddow has to say about MAGA, right? Because she's an honest journalist. She's an honest actor, right? A propagandist like Rachel Maddow. We would love to give her all the MAGA footage and trust that she's going to give an objective view. Just as we enjoy a propagandist like Tucker Carlson. Yeah, give him the footage, right? He's the biggest show, right? That's the metric. How many views you get. It's not about your ethics or journalistic integrity. That doesn't matter. What matters is this is the number one show in the country. So why shouldn't you give him the video? Why shouldn't you give MAGA videos to Rachel Maddow? Makes sense. Thanks, Jimmy.
Now has gotten control of that stuff instead of the Democrats and Republicans establishment. Now they gave over having access to those tapes of what.
Instead of the Democrat and Republican establishments, who do you think Tucker Carlson works for? Did you not see the text messages? Did you not see the expose on Fox News right now that we pretty much know definitively? I mean, we've known this previously, but now we have it concrete that they're essentially a propaganda arm of the Republican Party. So what is your job here, Jimmy Dore, in propping up and promoting the propaganda arm of the Republican Party? And by the way, the Republican Party is the establishment, right? Right.
What happened on January 6th. Now they gave him to Tucker Carlson, and here he makes his case that the January 6th committee is a bunch of liars who concocted a narrative.
If there's one takeaway from the corpus of footage that we spent 3 weeks looking at, it's that the January 6th committee lied. Its members are liars. And as a result of those lies, core civil liberties in this country were eroded. People went to prison. They're in prison as of right now, unjustly. So those lies had consequences.
So that's a big statement. That's the number one newsman in America, or he's the host of the number one news show in America.
Why do you keep bringing up how many viewers he has? Why is that a metric? Again, Rachel Maddow, she has credibility because of her viewership? What? Because in this country, we know that what really sells is honesty and objectivity, right? So if you have a lot of viewers, clearly that means that you are a good journalist, right? Because that's what Americans like. They love objectivity, right? That's when you look at the most popular news channels, they're the ones that are the most objective, right? Right? The ones that equally criticize the left and the right, equally criticize the Democrats and Republicans. That's what gets you a lot of views, right? It's not partisans like Ben Shapiro or Brian Tyler Cohen, right? The ones who lean into the ideology. They're not the ones who get the views, right, Jimmy? Right. Oh, how can we forget about you? Pretty much 98% of your content is anti-liberal, attacking the left, attacking the Democrats, silence about the right and the Republicans, just 2% going after them. This typical American propaganda business model. Right.
And I saw an article that said more Democrats watch Tucker Carlson in the demo than watch Rachel Maddow. So it's a very popular news show with Americans. And he just said everybody on the January 6th, one thing we know for sure is that they're all liars. That's the number one news show, turning the narrative completely 180.
Why is he making such a big deal about, again, the number one news show and the fact that Tucker Carlson said that they're liars? Rachel Maddow has said a lot of things about people on the right and Republicans. Should we get excited or have some kind of, special, give some special significance to her saying it because of the size of her audience? Oh, well, this is Rachel Maddow, one of the biggest people in liberal media, and she said that Trump is a white supremacist. I mean, wow, that completely changes the rhetoric and what we're hearing from right-wing media. Like, what? Jimmy? Really? I mean, this is not journalism and it's not comedy. What is it?
And so here he is. He makes his case. This is his general point is that we've been lied to and only shown a sliver. And here's his case.
These are the pictures you've seen of January 6th. They're familiar because they've been playing on a loop on every media outlet in America for the last 2 years. There's a reason for that. But it turns out there's quite a bit of video you haven't seen.
What is this expression that he's giving us? Why is he pretending like some profound point is being made? What have we seen or heard that is of any significance? We're looking at a video of an empty hall of some people walking around. Of what relevance is that? You had crowds of people that broke into the Capitol. I mean, think about any type of protest or riot where people sort of take over an area. When would there ever be a case where there's not some group somewhere there that are simply walking around? I mean, is the idea that we are supposed to have such a cartoon brain that we think that, like, when you see a Black Lives Matter protest, right? The stuff that sells is going to be the violence and chaos. So that's what they're going to show us, right? Because they're there to sell ads. That's what the news media in this country is all about, right? So they're going to keep showing us the sizzle, right? But do people have a cartoon brain? They think that that's the whole thing? That if you go anywhere in an area where there's a Black Lives Matter protest or riot, right? If you go anywhere, you're going to just see people fighting and screaming and throwing stuff. Nowhere around will you see an area where there's just some people walking orderly, right? I stand with BLM and I go to a protest with some friends and I'm not trying to do any criminal activity and we're just holding our signs, and at some point in time we wanted to go get a drink or something, and we just, we're just orderly walking, from one area to the next. Maybe we needed to go to the bathroom. Like, I mean, is this what he's trying to suggest? That this is so significant that somewhere in the building at some point in time that there are people that are just walking. Right? So the idea was, previous narrative was, we thought that it was 100% everyone fighting and being violent and craziness. Right? Okay.
Story about what happened on January 6th. More than 40,000 hours of surveillance footage.
Look at that. This is how dumb he thinks his audience is. He sees a clip of a guy lifting something up, and he acts as if, oh my goodness, look at that, someone picking something up. That somehow changes the narrative. So that's equivalent of the Chicago ambush that was not covered that I saw in liberal media, right? Where, from what I saw, it looks like BLM and Antifa coordinated to ambush the police, right? So if there was like cameras there that filmed the whole thing, and if I were to go and find some footage of a cop that falls down and one of the BLM people helps him up, right? And I played this video, and then I had the expression like Jimmy Dore has on his face, like, oh, look, they show this narrative of, oh, it was an ambush, and here's a guy helping a cop up. Like, what? This is how much of a bullshitter and dishonest actor that Jimmy Dore is. The fact that he thinks his audience is so dumb that a split second of a guy lifting something up warrants his body language. It's like, oh, look at this. We're exposing the narrative. Like, what?
Been withheld from the public. And once you see the video, you'll understand why. Taken as a whole, the video record does not support the claim that January 6th was an insurrection. In fact, it demolishes that claim. And that's exactly why the Democratic
Look, what is he doing? What is Jimmy doing?
Party and its allies in the media prevented you from seeing it. By controlling the images you were allowed to view from January 6th, they controlled how the public understood that day. They could lie about what happened, and you would never know the difference. Those lies had a purpose. They created a pretext for a federal crackdown on opponents of the Uniparty in Washington.
Our office wants to ensure that there was shock and awe, that we could charge as many people as possible.
The first thing you notice,
And I just this is probably going to seem outrageous to some people, but if Bernie Sanders became president, this is the exact kind of shit they would have did to him. They would have russiagated him for 4 straight years, and then they would have made his followers look.
Well, what I want to point out to you is Tucker Carlson is able to show you evidence of an insurrection, right? While at the same time 1984ing you and saying that the Dems created a narrative that this was an insurrection, and the footage challenges and shows that that was actually a lie. But he's literally showing footage that verifies that there was in fact an insurrection, right? I mean, do we need to look up the definition? So an insurrection is a violent uprising against an authority or government, right? He's showing a video of violence, police being assaulted, right? Police being assaulted by people in the crowd. That is absolutely violence, right? And we know what the intentions were of these people. They were trying to stop the certification of the election. That was absolutely a violent uprising against the government. Dishonest actors will try to change the topic and refer to other instances of their political opponents being violent with government and saying, well, that's an insurrection too, right? But don't let them play those childish games. We're not talking about other incidents. We're talking about this incident, which was clearly an insurrection. But again, the amazing thing is that he shows evidence of an insurrection while at the same time saying that this evidence of an insurrection is evidence that it's not an insurrection. And yet, I'm sure a majority of his viewers didn't even pick up on the hypocrisy or the ridiculousness of that statement. He can show you evidence of a thing and say that it is the opposite of what it clearly is, and have people just be like, oh, yeah, mm-hmm. Wow.
Like violent insurrectionists, and they have to be shunned from polite society because they're the only people standing up against the Uniparty. That's what would have happened to Bernie Sanders.
He wasn't even president. They said his followers hate women.
They said his followers hate women. They said he hate women. They said he was a Russian. He was getting propped up by the Russians. Max, you want to say something?
Remember the chair throwing incident in Nevada?
They made them out to be violent at a bullshit caucus in Nevada. They said that they were throwing chairs, and then senators from the Democratic Party were flipping them off, and they said they were doing that because they were being.
So Jimmy Dore just showed a video of people violently attacking our Capitol, attacking police officers, And now he's making a whole thing about how the fact that people called out the fact that they're violent, that's exactly what they would do to Bernie supporters who aren't violent. So he's saying that they would smear Bernie Sanders supporters as violent insurrectionists. And he's implying that they're not being violent. But why does he mention this in a context where clearly the people are being violent and the descriptions of them are accurate? Now you could go and you can expand into the declaration that all people who voted for Trump are the same as the people attacking the cops, right? That would be dishonest and inaccurate, right? But because there are people who say ridiculous things, right? Okay, I mean, there's always going to be people who say ridiculous things all the time. Let's stay focused, right? Let the idiots say idiotic things, right? But let's stay focused on what we're talking about. This is in fact a violent insurrection, and Tucker Carlson is showing evidence that it was in fact a violent insurrection, while saying it was not. And now Jimmy Dore is expanding on that by pretending as if you didn't see what you just saw, and using it to say, oh, Bernie, they would do the same thing to the Bernie people. What? The best part is, most of his audience will fall for it. Just like Tucker's audience. Not because people on the left are stupid or people on the right are stupid. No, Americans are stupid. This country lacks a lot of critical thinking skills. You have a lot of emotional people that are easy to be manipulated by people like Tucker and Jimmy. So while Tucker and Jimmy get wealthier and wealthier and more money, more power, their audience stays ignorant, right? Caught up in the illusion that these people create for their own profit and prey and fame and egos.
Violent, which was all made up. They just made it up. Just like this January 6th stuff is largely made up. Not all of it.
Notice he says largely made up. Right? What part is made up? You haven't shown anything that's made up. Right? So far, the video that they've shown confirms the narrative. Right? It was a violent insurrection. You saw violent insurrection. And his analysis is that this shows that it was made up. Well, not all of it. That's that Tim Pool hedging.
There was some violence happening there, but
there was some violence happening there. This is where Jimmy Dore's skill comes in. This stuff is very effective, right? The fact that he is, putting in there somewhere, sprinkling in a little bit of acknowledgement that there was violence in there, right? That is his cover.
Watch what Tucker has to say.
Viewing the full video record of January 6th is just how many people entered the Capitol building that day. Hundreds and hundreds of people, possibly thousands, over the course of about 2 hours. The crowd was enormous.
Notice in that video that he just showed, those were not people being let in by the police. Those are people forcing their way in, right? A whole bunch of people forcing their way into the Capitol, which was the narrative. Tucker is confirming the official narrative of what happened, meanwhile simply saying it's the opposite of what clearly it is. And Jimmy Dore is helping him to do this. Why?
Wow.
A small percentage of them were hooligans. They committed vandalism. You've seen their pictures again and again. But the overwhelming majority weren't. They were peaceful. They were orderly and meek. These were not...
Yes, which is the case for most of these types of riots or protests, right? When you see a Black Lives Matter event and you watch on Fox News, right, all they're going to show you is the juiciest, which is the violence, right? They're going to show you the people throwing rocks at the cops and saying whatever, the crazy thing. That's what sells, right? That's what these dishonest actors in mainstream media like Tucker Carlson do. And supposedly Jimmy Dore is against that kind of deceptive reporting, but actually he's not, because here he is supporting exactly the kind of dishonest actor that we see in mainstream media. Here's Jimmy Dore supporting mainstream media. Fox News. This is the biggest guy on Fox News. He's so big on Fox News, you might as well call him Fox News, right? He is Fox News. And here is this supposedly anti-establishment guy promoting a narrative coming from a dishonest mainstream media clown. What does that make Jimmy Dore?
Insurrectionists, they were sightseers. Footage from inside the Capitol overturns the story you've heard about January 6th. Protesters queue up in neat little lines. They give each other tours outside the Speaker's office. They take cheerful selfies and they smile. They're not destroying the Capitol. They obviously revere the Capitol. They're there because they believe the election was stolen from them. They believe in the system.
So now you're not allowed to believe that, and we're not allowed to say that on YouTube. We're not saying that the 2020 election was in any way anything but above board and perfect. But the 2016 election, you could say it was stolen. And
let me show you something. So I want you to take a look at this footage, which was shown over a year ago from Vice, which is not known to be an objective media outlet. This is definitely a partisan media outlet. So Jimmy Dore is all surprised that, they hid this peaceful. They were just peaceful, right? Okay. So let's see what Vice showed. Vice, because all the media, they just showed violence, and they didn't show that they were peaceful people as well, right? Okay. Let's see.
We're
You just got a few people standing around, no violence, right? No big deal.
Capitol Police just announced that there was a breach. Somebody or some people got into the building past security. So they've locked the chamber in the House and they've locked the chamber in the Senate. Everything seems safe.
Everything seems safe. This is what Vice Media reported over a year ago. Right? Tucker Carlson did some big expose, right, showing that it wasn't all violent. There were some peaceful people there just mulling around, right? This is the footage they hid from us. The same footage that we saw over a year ago. This guy literally just said, it's safe. We see people just mulling around, just like what Tucker Carlson showed. That's a big bombshell, is stuff that we saw over a year ago, right?
But they're taking no chances.
Stop the steal, stop the steal. I mean, imagine a bunch of people, Black Lives Matter, saying Black Lives Matter, right? We have a right to have our voices being heard, right? I don't see anything violent happening. They're just saying, now, I'm admittedly omitting the context of how they got in there and other stuff. But so is Tucker, right? Tucker is just showing you some random snippets of like peaceful mulling around, right? And trying to distract you from the broader context of what else is happening, right? So I'm doing the same thing here, right? In this moment, what we're seeing is not a violent insurrection, right? But because right now, in this moment, it's not a violent insurrection, doesn't mean that there wasn't a violent insurrection. You can't go to a BLM riot and show some people singing hymns and say, hey, this wasn't a Black Lives Matter riot, because look, there's people singing hymns. Fox News hid this from us. Fox News just showed all the violence and all this kind of stuff, and they didn't show us that it really wasn't a riot. It was a peaceful thing of people just singing, right? It was only a few people that attacked the police, right? Right.
And we're getting beat up, but the people who didn't vote for him are laughing at us.
That's why I'm just saying.
Here we have some Trump supporters having a civil conversation with a police officer who, by the way, is wearing a red MAGA hat. Right? This is not a violent insurrection. Right? This is a video over a year ago reported by Vice. Right? And many other mainstream media outlets also reported on the full event. Right? They did in-depth coverage of the entire thing. You want to focus on the fact that they keep showing the violent stuff on loop? I mean, I critique that, and you should as well, right? They're exploiting it. But don't pretend like they didn't actually cover the full thing, right? There were many mainstream outlets that covered the full thing. They covered the grandmas and grandpas just walking around peacefully. They covered the police just letting them in, right? They covered the people just basically protesting, right? Peacefully, just, saying stop the steal. They think the things were stolen and they're saying that's fine. Mainstream media did show that. Even a partisan outlet like Vice showed it as well. Once again, here's a police officer wearing a MAGA hat talking peacefully to these Trump supporters, right? What is the big expose that Tucker Carlson is showing us? I don't get it.
How can we help to take control of what we're dealing with? Well, you can help me right now. If you guys can help me say some of the guys. I know you don't know everybody here, obviously. No. Yeah, but if you guys can help me extract these people, I'd appreciate it.
They're not going to leave. You want them to leave?
No, they can stay there. I just need to get the other officers out.
He's saying that they don't have to leave. They can stay there. Vice News, right? Contrary to what Tucker Carlson is saying, oh, they hid this stuff. Vice News, they could have chosen not to show this part. This is an edited piece. Vice News put together an edited piece showing what they chose to show, and what they chose to show included the full context of interactions like this. Peaceful interaction with police officers, right? Showing support for the protesters. Peaceful protesters. People just mulling around. This is old news, and Tucker Carlson is able to fool people because there's half the country that didn't watch the footage. They didn't watch the coverage. They didn't watch the hearings. They didn't watch the news media coverage of the event, right? All they watched is in their little bubble, their right-wing media bubble, that hid all this stuff. And that's amazing. You have mainstream media, trash mainstream media, that showed way more about what happened on January 6th than anyone in right-wing media has. Way more coverage, way more context from mainstream media, right? But yet, right-wing media who covered maybe 10% of January 6th, right? Didn't really show much of the footage at all except anything that would kind of defend their side. Somehow, they're being celebrated right now as telling the real narrative, right? So you have, let's say, if I'm to guess, roughly, I put it at 90% of the story covered by mainstream media, right? 90% covered. I mean, people showed live, the whole thing live from beginning to end, unedited. You got that from mainstream media. They covered at least 90% of this event. Right-wing media probably covered 10% of it, right? Only the stuff that make the left look bad or Democrats look bad or things that downplayed, their perceived side, right? That's what they did. They found the 10% of, stuff that just to counter the narrative. That's the point. Not to inform their audience, but to counter the narrative that's uncomfortable, right? So the side that covered 10% of this, right, covers some stuff now, years later, which was also covered by mainstream media, and somehow they're celebrated. So the people showing you the least amount of stuff are perceived as the ones who are really telling you the truth. And the ones who showed you the most of it are the ones who are looked at now as they were just lying and everything's lying and they didn't show this stuff and they were hiding this kind of stuff. Again, over a year ago, we saw this.
They're trying to get out. I can do that. Let's go. Okay, if you guys just I can help. Okay, you can even use.
Here are Trump supporters offering help to the police officers. Amazing. Is Tucker Carlson going to also show us this footage and show this bombshell, like, oh, this is what the media hid from you, and just cover up the Vice logo?
My megaphone and I'll follow you. You gotta get out. It's about 10 officers up there.
Stop touching him. Stop touching him. Wow. This really debunks the narrative that mainstream media, oh, wait a minute, Vice is saying this. So here we show Trump supporters backing the blue, protecting the cop and saying don't touch him. This is the stuff that we're supposed to believe was hidden from us, but yet it was shown over a year ago. Right. Look at this. Where's the violent insurrection? People just standing around, like it's a tour. Like this is a tour of the right? This is the narrative that they've been pushing, and here, this is stuff that supports it. You know, we're supposed to be stupid, that we can't believe two things can be true. That there can't be components of the insurrection that, well, I shouldn't say the insurrection, components of this event that were peaceful and orderly, right? We have to have this cartoonish black and white view that it's either all in chaos and everyone's violent, everyone's doing craziness, or it's really peaceful and you know, just don't really think about the violence. That was just a few little people, right? So if a bunch of left-wing people go to the White House, right, and they're like, you know, we gotta, whatever it is they fighting for, you know, racism needs to end, right? And in that event, they end up bombing, I don't even want to say the word on YouTube. Let's just say the building gets bombed. The building that I referred to earlier, right, gets bombed, right? The fact that it's only 3 people that were involved in the actual B word, you gotta be very careful, right? That dismisses the fact that the left-wing folks went to this building, you know, aggressively, like, we gotta whatever, right? And in that event, this really violent thing occurred. And then the final detail is, overwhelmingly, the people who went there did not really stand up against the explosion, right? They're not the biggest ones. We got to get to the bottom of who did this and who did the bomb and they need to be locked up. No. Right? So they will pretend. So if you have a bunch of left-wingers who go to this event and this major violence happens, right? And even though most of them weren't violent, they're certainly not concerned about the violence. They're not the ones that are really saying, like, you know what I mean? Like, imagine if that happened. And they try to downplay it by saying, oh, there were only 3 people that did the violence, right? Most of them were just singing songs. So when we look at this as a major event, an event where a bunch of, you know, left-wing people went to this location and it ended up in this bombing, right? Right? That event happens. And then we have left-wing people saying it wasn't that big of a deal. It was only 3 people that did the bombing. Most people were just singing. So the people that are looking at this as it's a major tragedy, it's, oh my goodness, right? They're hysterical. It wasn't a major tragedy. It was actually a peaceful event. Most people were peaceful. It was only 3 people that did the bombing, right? That is the logic we're supposed to accept. Right.
The cops are leaving. Make go home.
Can someone tell me where the violent insurrection is? I don't see it. No one's being violent here. No one is being violent here. Right? So if I want to mislead you, I can pretend like this is the only thing that happened. And then I hedge by saying, yeah, and they were, you know, I'm not saying there wasn't violence. Some people were violent, but this is how most of them were. And?
Hi, this is Representative John Curtis coming to you from inside my office here in the Capitol. And first and foremost, want to let everybody know that those of us that are in the Capitol and in our offices are feeling safe and secure, even though
they feel safe and secure. Where is the violent insurrection, right? Now we understand why Jimmy Dore is so shocked, because this totally blows the narrative. Only this was over a year ago on Vice. I saw similar pieces like this on the Washington Post, I think New York Times as well.
There's quite a bit of turmoil on the outside.
You want to fight? You verbally, you got
The Vice President of the United States was just rushed off the floor of the House by Secret Service. This is Banana Republic crap that we're watching happen.
They're following direct orders. We don't do this shit. We don't do this shit.
Anyway, this is nonsense. This country is infested with propaganda. Partisan media needs to go. Left-wing partisan media, right-wing partisan media, not a fan. Mainstream media is trash. Independent media, even worse. However, some of the best media we have in this country are in fact independent. But independent media is also where we find the absolute worst. Overall, mainstream media is trash, but independent media is absolutely worse. Because it's random people, accountable to no one, that are only focused on views and attention and fame. And these are not unlike the millionaires in mainstream media. Many of these people, I mean, if you're doing it full time, this is how you're going to eat and keep a roof over your house. So you're really going to do the right thing, even if that means you starve? When it's just so easy to be partisan and biased and manipulative, right? Pander to your audience. Like, I mean, it's not like you're shoplifting or you're physically hurting someone, right? How many people could resist the urge to doing content that's biased and manipulative to feed themselves, right? How many people would choose to starve just because of their ethics? That's the problem with independent media. At least in corporate media, these guys in CNN and MSNBC, they are multi-millionaires. It's just greed why they do a lot of stuff they do. But they don't have the same level of incentive, right? Rachel Maddow is not fighting to eat and to survive, right? Any dishonesty she does, that's her choice. She chooses to do that. She chooses greed over integrity. But when you're fighting for your own survival, and you have many people in independent media that don't come from money, right? Maybe they work in a minimum wage job at some supermarket, and they try this social media thing, and you know, it starts getting successful, and then they double their salary in no time. How many people in that world are going to be willing to change course and go in a more honest way, and then have everything collapse so they can go back to flipping burgers? And that's not to demean anyone that's flipping burgers, but this is the world of social media. You have random people that have the ability to potentially go out there and put out content that's pandering to a certain audience and have a major increase in their lifestyle. That's a major incentive, right? And again, it's so easy to just do the stuff that gets the most clicks. It's easy for you to look and feel like I'm not really doing much harm, right? It's not a big deal. What's the big deal? Then I'm being partisan and biased, right? Anyway, comment below, let me know your thoughts.